the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Hello and welcome to this month's episode of Women in AV podcast. My name is Erica Carroll, and with me today is my lovely co-host Jennifer Goodyear. Hey, Jennifer.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm going to let Jennifer introduce our guests.
Yeah, for once I have someone with me right now, our special guest, Bradford Ben. Bradford, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born very young and then grew up a little bit, and I've been working in the theme park and audio industry and video, etc., for 30 years at this point. I'm here in Orlando. I've worked for Harman. I've worked for Universal. Currently, I work for myself at a consulting firm called Advisist. And everyone goes, how do you pronounce that and why? Well, a physicist is an expert in physics, an advisist is an expert giving advice. So there's that. And I'm happy to be here. And we are proving that there is podcast inequity, just like meeting inequity, by being in the same room.
Yeah, but I feel like we have a special relationship here that you won't talk too much over me.
As far as you know.
Yeah, that's what we're going to try to aim for. I'm setting my boundaries now. And Catherine, go ahead. Tell us more about yourself.
Hello. Good to see you guys. Catherine Cordina. I also was, I've been in the industry for a very long time. I started in the mid-90s, if you will. And I live in the very hot Dallas, Texas right now, hot and humid. And I work for Sound Control Technologies.
Very cool. Well, we wanted to specifically this episode talk to some industry experts and just see how the industry has changed. We've talked about the now a lot with our subjects. And since Bradford's known me since I was in diapers, I thought maybe he would be a good person to have on. And Catherine's been in the industry a long time and she's worked in different fields, so she can give us different perspectives. So Erica, would you like to start with our first topic?
Oh, man. So, I mean, this is longer than I've been in the industry, which compared to you guys, it's like nothing. No offense. But what's been like the most pivotal or groundbreaking or game-changing technology that's been introduced in AV? How has it shifted over the years? What was it like when you started versus what we see now? I'll start with Catherine.
Well, that's a great question. So when I started in the industry, I started on the control side. I worked for AMX in the 90s. And back in the 90s, if you remember, everything was analog. And I think the biggest thing through my career that I have lived through, experienced, and kind of gone from start to finish on, if you will, is that move from analog to digital, and how all the manufacturers had to deal with a shift in that type of technology. And it was not graceful. It was, actually, I think it threw a lot of people for a loop on how we were going to actually make that shift and how that was going to actually happen and be successful. And you had some manufacturers that were on the bleeding edge. You had some manufacturers that kind of waited in the wings to see if that was actually going to be a viable option as a movement within AV. So as you know, right now, everything is still in digital. So it lasted. But from a kind of a process, that was the biggest thing I think that I've seen through my career, from, like I said, kind of a start to a present, if you will, of what kind of stuck.
How about you, Bradford?
I very much agree with Catherine. I think there's two parts to the digital transformation, though. There's the hardware-based one, and then the transports. So, for instance, I remember when crossovers were resistors and capacitors and inductors, and you had to adjust them with that knob on the front, and there were more phase shifts, and then digital started coming in and replacing that, and everything started going that way. And it still cracks me up that there are companies called Analog Way and Analog Devices that make digital chips, but that's neither here nor there.
Name recognition.
Exactly. But I think that's been a big change because it's changed the way systems are designed as it went to digital, because more things could be done. Such as, oh, I want to put in a 31 band EQ instead of a 16 band EQ. It's just a software change, and you could tweak more finely than you could with analog. And then the other is obviously the digital transformation of first CobraNet and now Dante, of just how much the infrastructure changes were. And that was a huge impact that I think not everyone understands how much of a culture shift that was and how much of an impact it had, because all of the sudden category 5 cable could carry 64 channels of audio, whereas before that would be a 2-inch piece of multi-pair and you needed a bigger piece of conduit, and then you had to solder them and troubleshoot and isolate them and all those things. So I think the transform to digital has been the biggest thing, and it's been, like I said, twofold, because even if you look today at quote unquote analog devices, such as mixing consoles that have knobs instead of all being virtual, 9 times out of 10, it's controlling an analog device inside or a digital device inside of it. I think my toothbrush even has a digital device inside of it to tell me if I've brushed enough. But that's kind of been the biggest change in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Totally
And
agree.
when the industry had to basically say, everyone, this is chaos, we need to have some control here, and switched over to AES 67, did that make a big change for everyone? Did everyone jump on board, or they kind of had to? I just hear stories, basically.
So, from my point of view, AES 67 is more of interoperability transport than control, because of its, I don't want to say an open source version of Dante, but it uses a lot of the same protocols. It's what people thought Ethernet AVB, now TSN, time sensitive networking, is. So a lot of companies did okay, it's an open standard just like AES3 was. We don't have to pay licensing, etc. So that was a big change. But then still, a lot of companies, for various business reasons, no, we're going to use our protocol. You look at QLAN, it's their protocol. You look at Harman and BlueLink, it's their protocol. Yamaha and Tascam have protocols. There's advantages to that and disadvantages. I think the other thing is looking at it from a straight control point of view. Going to TCP/IP from RS-232 became a huge bonus, but no one agreed on how it's supposed to work. There are various protocols ranging from, it used to be AES 192 to OSC for open sound control, that would allow you, in theory, to do all of this control. But I think, as we all know, with AMX and Crestron and QSYS, and I can list many more, Control 4, that's never actually happened. And I think the marketplace hasn't asked for it enough yet. But that's been one of those things that's changed, is because of IP and how much control one can get. And IP meaning Internet Protocol, that control has kind of gone way open and way over the top, but each person is doing it their own way. And part of that, a console needs different controls than a microphone does.
Well, and if you just look as a whole and take it even just in a broader statement, I mean, AV has never really been big on standards. I mean, there's never been a whole lot of true standards that we define ourselves by, if you will. So that just kind of tags on to what you were saying as far as, how things flow. So
Specifically for technology adherence, and it's there's a lot of standardized protocols out there that are not as widely adopted, like HDBaseT. If that was a standard that everybody went by, we'd have a lot more interoperability as well. I have a question for you, Catherine. Now, because we worked at a particular signal distribution and control manufacturer together.
We did.
And when I came into the industry just over a decade ago, I had to learn what RS-232 was, because that was way before my time, but it was still very prevalent here. And where we worked, we used like our RS-232 over IP.
Yeah.
Do you see RS-232 as an antiquated language / technology? Do you see it sticking around?
That's a great question. It is right now.
Yeah, it's never going away. It's
not broke, don't fix it.
It's the cockroach of the control industry.
Jennifer, that's a good way to say it. That's a great question though, but right now, I think it's around for a bit.
Yeah. Can I piggyback on that and ask what other technology? So there's been so many technologies introduced. Bradford and I were just talking about this, that with the CTS books, how are they going to come out with new books every 3 months when there's new technology constantly being thrown into our industry? Is there a technology that has come out recently that you think is here for good?
Okay, so this gets kind of rough to my heart on this, but as much as it's unregulated and whatnot right now, I think the technology of AI is not going to go away. I personally am a little afraid of it in a lot of regards, but I think that technology is here to stay, and I also think that VR, virtual reality, is here to stay. I don't think it's going to be a fad. I think there's a lot of really cool use cases for something like virtual reality, and there are some cool use cases for AI. But then again, you look at those technologies and you have to look at how would they actually be incorporated into all of the different things that an AV integrator, an AV company actually does, So I think that there's going to be a percentage of business that goes that direction, but then there's going to be a percentage of business that remains the different workday place type technology that we see that we're doing currently. The way that we do things changes, and we see it change based upon different cool things, but you have to really look at use case scenarios for those types of technologies, in whether it's a standard boardroom or are you doing something else within training facilities or something like that. I think, those technologies have their places, but I think I kind of think they're going to stick around.
How about you, Bradford? I mean, if I were to ask you about AI, I think it needs to be at the bar. So we have 3 hours for you to tell me your opinion.
Oh, I want to be at that bar.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have an opinion on it, but what technology do you think is here to stay?
Actually, what we're using now, remote meeting technology and working from anywhere. I also agree that AI is here to stay, but I also think that AI is overused as a term. I've had people explain to me that acoustic echo cancellation is AI, and I'm kind of like, that was out on codecs back in the 2000s where there wasn't that much processing. So I think there's also a certain amount of AIs being thrown on everything. But I think the work from any place, whether that be recording studios where you can stream audio and record locally, kind of like what we're doing here, or if it's just I'm having a meeting and I'm doing it here instead of going to the office, I think that is it's AV technology that's here to stay. I think there is going to be enhancements and tweaks with it as there are to everything, but I think online meetings and work from anywhere is a here to stay thing.
You know what I think is so interesting about that, which I totally agree with you, Bradford, 100%. But think back, I hate to say it, think back 20 years when we actually were doing distance learning
with satellites.
Yeah, and nobody kind of outside of, a select vertical or a select, because a lot of that was like education facilities kind of being on a cutting edge of that remote learning, if you will. Nobody knew about it, many people, and now look at it. I mean, if you can't talk to a person today that doesn't understand when you say something about video conferencing or whatnot, but this was started, with satellites. 20 years ago, something, maybe even prior to 20 years. I don't know. I can't give an exact date, but I think,
It was back before that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will also say to go with that, because you used to work at AMX, and I put in a lot of AMX, and the fact that we used to do remote monitoring and control via US Robotics 14.4 dial-up modem hooked up via RS-232, which is registered standard number 232,
Wow.
and a null modem cable into an Accent 3 frame or a mainframe. Yeah. So, but we're still doing that nowadays. But everyone thinks it's, oh my God, this new thing, we're going to the cloud and remote monitoring. I'm like, I was doing that last century with dial-up. What's new about this?
You bring up an interesting point, because one thing I thought about my experience, again, shorter time frame, something that's been a big differentiator. When I started, I was at Digital Projection, which was like, home cinema for the elite, basically. And something I have seen more and more recently is how easy it is for the average person to control their homes and program with easy, IoT devices. And that was traditionally really reserved for the rich. So I feel like it's part of this transformative, switch of things that everybody used to do in the past was a lot more difficult and complicated and paid for that expertise. And now anybody can do it.
Yeah, there was a horror. Remember, Erica? There was like a horror film when we were growing up about a smart house, and they were stuck.
Oh, it like locked them in.
Yeah,
yeah.
And now that would not be a horror film because everyone has that, and they would know how to get out.
Right.
And I do think that's an interesting point, because it's one of my pet peeves that I yell at the kids with to get off my lawn or I'll beat them with my cane, is that it's become easy. So a lot of the fundamentals are getting lost, in my opinion, of the how do you find a ground loop? And people are like, why would you get a ground loop? Well, you can still get it for this, this, and this. Or how do I terminate an RJ45 connector, or how do I test this? A lot of those, I just plug in a microphone and it works, kind of has lost some of the things that add value for integrators and for designers of the, okay, this works, but this is a better solution, and here's why.
Well, kind of just take the analogy of back with records versus CDs versus digital music. I mean, there's nothing like a record on a record machine from a sound perspective, right? And they're great. I mean, I wish I had one. But you can buy them again now. So
yeah, you can.
So,
and there's popping up everywhere. That's like technology. That stuff is coming back. I mean, it's heartbreaking when has anyone? Sorry, I'm segueing all over the place, but has anyone seen the BlackBerry movie that came out about? Okay, so it's about the BlackBerry.
I've heard great things about it.
It's amazing. I watched it over the weekend. It was watch it immediately. It's got great reviews. It was really, really good. I loved my BlackBerry. I was obsessed. And I really struggled having to switch. Now I'm obviously love my iPhone, but is there any technology from an AV standpoint that you've either been heartbroken to watch leave or would be heartbroken if it left?
That's an interesting question. So again, back to like when I was at Digital Projection, at the time, people were like, "Oh, projection's going to die. Displays are getting bigger." But at the same time, I'm like, we're mapping onto castles and pyramids. You can't do that with a display." So
I would say for me, the things that I'm seeing go away that I very much miss are analog multiple controls on a device, because there can be a 5-band parametric EQ that's digital and sounds great and has great phase response and 132 dB dynamic range and this and that. But just being able to go over and turn the knobs and tweak it till it squeaks is something I miss, because I think that loses a lot of the control you have and a lot of the spontaneity and a lot of the art, because now it's let me open up my software, go to 7 layers deep. Even if you're working on a console, it's going to have a little screen that you have to adjust everything through. And that's one of those technologies that I miss it, not because it was analog, but because the interface was better.
Yeah. That's your version of losing the BlackBerry clicking that everyone was addicted to.
It's pretty close. It's the whole going from a hard keyboard to a virtual keyboard that broke everyone on the iPhone.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, on the other side of that, what are you excited to see in the future? Where do you think we're going to go 10 or 20 years from now?
I think that things are going to continue down the path with, obviously, with video conferencing. I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think that if you start looking at all the go back to the Jetsons cartoons and go back to the Simpsons, they can totally predict what's coming. But I do think that that's going to be something that continues. Although I believe, just based on some things that I've read and whatnot, that offices are not going to go away. I think that the hybrid workspace is going to continue, but I think that that what we're building of this next upcoming generation is kind of a little bit interesting, because it does have to do with technology, which is you've got this generation that's grown up, that started in elementary school on virtual learning. And, that trend of virtual learning and virtual working and things like that, I think that's going to kind of guide that generation into the next big thing, if you will, of what do those that generation expect from technology. Because, you look at the kids that, we chuckle at the videos that you see where kids have an analog phone, that has a thing, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to make a phone call. I think that's just going to continue with technology and the next big things that are coming. So I don't know. That doesn't really answer the question, but
no, it does.
Kids are guiding the future.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more and more middleware as the next item. And for those who aren't familiar with the term middleware, we've all used it. We just don't realize it. It's the piece of software that lets item A talk to item B, even though they don't speak natively. And that's going to be the big thing in AV, is that middleware piece. But it's not just going to be control. We already see it with plugins for Adobe Audition and Audacity and for Waves consoles and all those. So I see that middleware and modular software, so to speak, is going to be the next big 20-year thing. And I also think this is where I think AI is going to make an impact, and we're going to miss it, is people are going to load things like this, the podcast, et cetera, into a piece of software that's AI driven and hit remove echo, balance levels, increase intelligibility, and not actually learn how to do that. I think those are going to be the things, and that will be the thing that we can't deal without. It's like we were debating codecs. Jennifer and I were debating codecs before, as we were examining a microphone, trying to figure out what was the microphone sound and what was the video codec sound. And I think now being able to go, oh, I want this codec instead of that, is going to become more available.
Yeah, that was actually something that Erica and I talked about when we were at Infocom. We were trying to see what is the big trend, what are you seeing more on the show floor? And we both agreed we think everyone is accepting that they need to work together. So third-party integration is just not no longer a nice to have. Some products wrap their head around it, that maybe in the future, like you're saying, in the future, everyone's going to basically need to work together with their middleware.
And
yeah, that's a very good point.
And Catherine, you and I, knowing AMX, that's what AMX was. That's what Crestron is. That's what OSC is. There are so many different items that do that. Even if you're looking at an Elgato Stream Deck, it's middleware. And that's going to be the big piece nowadays. And I think it's one of the reasons that home assistants are so prevalent, because they put in that middleware that does all of that communication for you.
But Bradford, what I find interesting about that too is that so when I started at AMX, we were a control system company. That's what AMX was, right? Crestron was a control system company. AMX was a control system company. Extron made switchers. AutoPatch made switchers. And then all of a sudden, it was everybody playing in everybody else's sandbox. AMX bought AutoPatch. Crestron designed their own switching system, whatever. But they started playing in their own sandbox, and they wanted everybody to only work with their products, right? So I feel like we've gone from separate everything to everybody has to work with other manufacturers to, hey, let's just work with us. And we're splitting back out to, we've got to be able to work with everybody. So I feel like we've kind of come somewhat full circle to, we're back to, okay, we've got to be able to work with other manufacturers, and everybody needs to kind of work together. You may offer product lines within other people's sandbox, if you will, which now there's just beach. There is no sandbox, it's all just beach.
There is no sandbox. I like that.
Yeah, but manufacturers are realizing that they do have to go back to being able to work with having their products talk to other manufacturers' products. It's not just going to be an all for one, because if you look at an integrator, I think, in my opinion, wants to be creative and wants to have that freedom to say, I can do this and I can do that, and I can have these manufacturers work together to create this solution. And that's the solution that our customer wants, right? And if the freedom is not there to integrate, I mean, what does the word integrate mean? I mean, it kind of gives you the thought process that that's going to be created for an ultimate solution, whether it's one manufacturer or 40 manufacturers that are all talking together. So I think we've come full circle.
I agree with you, and I think I'm not going to say human nature. I think the better phrase is business nature. Of the manufacturers want you to buy their entire product family, so they make it work together. And until that's either broken or made successful, people are going to keep doing this. And I honestly think it's never going to be made successful, because there's too many variables. It's like, tell me which one speaker you're going to use for every project.
Yeah.
Something that Jen and I like to ask everybody is how you got into AV.
And I really like asking this, because now when we're talking to people that are just entering the industry, it's their first 5 years. Some of them are actually finding their way in because if I have a friend of mine that's in the industry, they graduated They graduated from wholesale and wanted to do AV. They didn't just fall into it. But I'm assuming 15, 20 years ago, there's no path. You just fall in. What happened to you? How'd you get here?
I actually studied technical theater, specializing in lighting and sound design in college. I was actually even recruited for it. So I've been interested in AV and technology. Literally, I can remember getting a Panasonic plastic cassette deck when I was 5 and playing with the cassette and making it make weird sounds. So I didn't have a choice.
You were always
I
here.
was always, but it was one of those things where, though, in the 80s, it was theater or it was music production. There wasn't integration as a known thing. And then I happened to come down to Florida and got a job working in theme parks, and the rest, as they say, is history. But that's honestly how I got here. Was I toured rock and roll. I used to mix at various events. It's what I've been doing since I was 6, 5 or 6. It's just, that's it. It's like some people say it's my calling. Okay, it's my calling.
I see that. I 100% believe that. Knowing anyone that talks to you for, I think, 5 minutes, because this is the AV unicorn. He's always meant to do this.
Yeah, it sounds funny. It's what I do. That's it. Now, can I turn it off at night and just watch a movie? No, I have to go to certain movie theaters. But it's one of those things of, it's just what I've been doing forever. And it started as I enjoyed doing it in high school, got recruited in college, and then found a successful career path. So I'm not going to say it was intentional, but the audio industry was intentional, but I didn't know about integration when I took the job.
Gotcha.
How about you, Catherine?
That's the exact same story I have. Just kidding. No, I fell into it. I tripped. I fell. I tried to get away. It didn't happen. But my dad was a manufacturer's rep for components, for board level components. And he repped a line called Phoenix Contact. And he used to sell AMX every single Phoenix connector that they bought back in the day. And I graduated from college, and he said, time to get a job. There's this really cool company that I call on, and they're a technology company, and you should go talk to them. And in wonderful dad fashion, we did my resume together, and he delivered my resume to AMX. And after some fun interviews and with Scott Miller at the time, the culture was there. I didn't have a clue about, I knew I wanted to do sales or business development of some sort. But that's not where I started. I started in the training department, making manuals, learning about technology, because I had no idea what AMX did. And really, really happy that it found me, because it's been a fun ride. It's not over yet. It's been a fun ride. And I love the fact that there's just so many amazing people in this industry. And I'm happy that we're, promoting finding new people in our industry, because I think that so many people trip and fall and, run into it, that I feel like we're growing up. Like we're, we're growing up in the way that people can actually find us, as a true career path, a true way to go and drop into it. So yeah, I just love it.
On that note, I want to do a shameless plug, because Jen and I have been working on the Rosie Riveters Explorers Pro AV fundraiser. You can find out more at avgives.com.
Yay!
Last year, you and Kelly Perkins hosted the Dallas events. Now, first, I also want to say last year, Bradford was our elite sponsor with Advisist, and thank you so much for that and your continued efforts. In Dallas, we were able to provide kits for elementary schools. And y'all went in there and you actually did a career day and you were able to talk to the kids and do an assembly. And we're actually exposing AV as a career to elementary age children.
Yeah.
That to me is like blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Kelly and I had the best time doing that. She and I raised, for Rosie Riveters, I think we raised like $3,500 for that. It provided 250 kits. I think one of the cool things that I don't even know if I told you guys this, but we were in a classroom and a couple of the kids were like, we have our bracelets. They're like,
that's awesome.
You remember. But yeah, it was amazing to be able to talk to them about AV and technology and, you know, kind of looking at a classroom and saying, do you know that this is a true career that you can do? And, you know, these were fifth graders and really smart fifth graders. One young girl actually said, my dad's in that industry. We're like, who's your dad?
Yeah.
That's how we know them.
Yeah, it's a very high probability. But yeah, we're so pleased, and we want to do more of that. Kelly and I personally, because that's a big passion of ours as well. So
yeah, I want to bring that actually full circle, is because Bradford was our title sponsor, our elite sponsor. It was a situation where I couldn't really get we couldn't really get anyone on board at first. It was all just personal sponsors. We weren't moving the needle at all. And Bradford was very passionate when he spoke to me on the phone. He's like, this is important. This is so, so, so important. Like, we need to get grassroots. We need to get in there. We need to talk to these kids. We need to show these girls that this is an existing industry to begin with and that they belong here. And I was just really so moved and touched that he wanted to give so much and get us started. And it's really cool to see it come full circle that Catherine and Kelly went and spoke to these students and got them interested. Yeah. So you get to see it come full circle.
Yeah. Thank you, Bradford. Yeah. We appreciate it.
Welcome. And of course, obviously, we got to talk about upcoming year and what excitement is going on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was very important to me, and still is, that we get people, even if they're not going to be in AV. I know horrors of horrors, but just the whole science, technology, engineering. I also believe in arts and math. Getting that all exposed to everyone, to me, is a huge thing. Getting people in AV, great. Getting them in science, great. There's too many underrepresented people around that have a lot of really smart things to add. And I want to try to make sure that they have their chance.
And we love that. And I think that's going to change. I mean, I don't know if we have too much time left to talk about it. I know one of our topics was how the culture has changed. I can't speak to how the culture has changed, but from what these people on our call are doing, the culture will change. I really do see the future changing with what we're doing.
I agree. Well, we are sort of at the top of our time here, so I would like to thank you both for joining us here today. Catherine Cordina, thank you, ma'am. Where can people find you?
Thank you, guys. You can find me at soundcontrol.net or just on LinkedIn. I check the socials every now and then. But thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It's good to see you guys.
Absolutely. And Bradford, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for letting me steal you. He wasn't even going to do this. He was in another room getting a demo, and I pulled him in here against his will. He's strong. He's
Yeah,
really strong. It was difficult.
she promised me beer afterwards.
I did.
So.
Where can we find you?
At Home State Brewing. Oh, sorry. Probably advisist.com, advisist.com, which is my company, or on LinkedIn, of course. And because this is an AVNation podcast, you might be able to find my company Twitter handle, Lampooning Tim's Bears, because certain things have to stay, even though I personally have dropped off of Twitter.
Okay. That's a perfect way to end the show, I think.
That's
Well,
amazing.
thank you both so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you both, and we hope you all have a great week.